Hey, Screen Queen fans, back here with another Screen Queens vlog. Wouldn't you just know it, we've got less than a week left to the big finale, and they just had to add on another mystery. Of course, if you watched last night's episode, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you're probably going to want to stop watching the video because there'll be some spoilers. Okay, so let's get into it. So, last night's episode, we learned a little more about Pete, that Boone had left him all this stuff in his will, and that Boone had been his source for some kind of report he was doing on the Greek society. So that raised a whole lot of questions. Like, is that was Pete being honest? Of course, later we see him talking on the phone with someone, and it implies that he's been lying to us the whole time. And then at the end of the episode, he confesses to Grace that he's a murderer. So, mysteries are, what's Pete's deal, and who did he murder? So, I gave it some thought, and my first thought was he had murdered Chad Radwald. That Chad, if you watch that episode, excuse me, tried to get him to join the Dickie Dollar Scholars fraternity, and, Pete rejects it. So, Chad's like, well, then we're going to have a duel. And he, keeps threatening Pete. It was pretty funny. And then they just drop it from there. We don't see Chad ever again. So I thought, well, maybe Chad caught up with him. They had a duel, and guess who won? But then I gave it some real thought, and I said, that's a good theory, but I think I can do better. And here's who I think Pete actually killed: Mrs. Bean. Now I know if you watched, the first two episodes, you know that Chanel actually killed Mrs. Bean. She took her head, shoved it into the fryer. Lady's face got fried, and she died. But Chanel was always been, who the hell turned on the fryer? And I think that was Pete. And what this comes from is, I think that he's working with Melanie Dorcas. That's the one other sorority president from Kappa Kappa Tau. The one that got, she was getting a spray tan, and it turned out to be acid. And you saw, the red devil in the background. And I think that was actually Pete. I think Pete was stalking Melanie Dorcas. In the first episode, they put out that that Chanel had reported him for stalking her. I think he was actually stalking Melanie Dorcas. I think he had something going on with her. And Chanel just thought he was stalking her because she was always around Melanie Dorcas. Anyway, that's also what I think was on the phone. I think he's working with Melanie Dorcas to bring down Kappa Kappa Tau. Melanie Dorcas is pissed off at him because she, all her skin got burned off. And I think Pete knows who set Melanie Dorcas up. I think he saw whoever put the acid in, which I think is probably either Chanel 1, Chanel Prime, or Mrs. Bean. So they decided they were going to get revenge on them. They were going to, Pete, he of course found out about Chanel's plan to fake putting Mrs. Bean's head into the fryer, because when they set that up, it was at the coffee shop. It was Miss Bean and Chanel, and they were just blabbing on about this whole plan. He was working at the coffee shop at the time, so I think he heard it. And I think because he was working with Melanie Dorcas, he knew how to get into the house, through the tunnel system, and he set the fryer on. And they thought, oh, she's just going to burn the lady's face a little bit, payback's a bitch. And then he'd had this big story about how dangerous Kappa Kappa Tau is. But they didn't realize that Mrs. Bean would die, that Chanel would have her head in there so long that she'd die from it. And that's what he means by he's a murderer, because he's the one that turned on the fryer. Mrs. Bean's face got cooked off, and he feels guilty about it. And then, like I said, he was the Red Devil way back when Melanie Dorcas got burned, because he was the mascot, so he had the costumes, and he didn't want to be seen, so he's always wearing the costume, so he can go wherever he wants without anyone knowing it. I think he was the one that Grace saw when she first went into the house, And then all of a sudden you've got these other people wearing the costume going around killing people. He feels guilty because he thinks he set it all in motion. And that's my latest theory. And we'll see if this one turns out to be right or wrong. And we've got a week left. If you remember my video on the Red Devil Killer, I think that the one last one that we have not seen unmasked is Detective Chisholm. So last night I was kind of watching with like my nails biting because I knew he was in the episode and he wasn't credited for the next two. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be wrong here. He's going to get killed off in this episode. It was called, Black Friday, and I figured he got fired, which was right. He does get fired in this episode. I thought he was going to be working as like a mall security guard for Black Friday when the Chanels went there. And he knew that they were going to have this whole thing where they were in the mall and the Red Devil Killer was after him. And then he get killed off in that. He didn't get killed off last night. So he's still in the running. He can still be the Red Devil Killer. And last night, something that really just made me feel so good was that when they were talking about Gigi's death, he says, you're the boyfriend? The boyfriend is always the top suspect. Now, maybe that was a joke because we later find out that Pete, like I said, he's going to confess to be the murderer. So we're all supposed to think that Pete, who's Grace's boyfriend, sort of, is supposed to be the killer. But remember why I think Chisholm is the Red Devil Killer? I thought he was the boyfriend of the chick who ended up in the tub and died. And that the bathtub baby was his kid. Now, that's kind of been proven wrong, that he's not the father of the bathtub babies, but who knows, because maybe Pete's full of shit. And like I said, I just love it when he brought up the boyfriend. It's like, oh yeah. And even though he's the actor who plays him is not credited for the next episodes, doesn't mean he won't appear in it. I mean, it could be that they deliberately took his name off the thing so you wouldn't think that Chisholm moves me around, and then he turns out the Red Devil Killer. But we will have to see.